Good evening to all the HR professionals who've joined us today for this Learning Weekend series. I'm Kashish, your host for today, and our topic for today is integrating diversity and inclusion into business practices. Before we kickstart the session, for the benefit of professionals who joined us for the first time, I would like to give a brief introduction about our group. So we are a group of over 5,000 HR professionals, and the group is evolving at a rapid pace, continuing to grow exponentially. The next slide would show you how it take you through the journey of Core HRIR. The group was formed in January 2017 with a vision to become a globally acclaimed platform for sharing HR knowledge and insights. The vision was also to be the strongest group of leaders, motivators, who believe in fostering learning, nurturing long-term relationships, and remain connected selflessly for the sole purpose of making a difference to the HR fraternity. Our initiatives, so in the past 3 years, we've come up with a series of initiatives to make it a value-add group for everyone who's a part of the group. So our initiatives to support our vision are WhatsApp group, which is a live bio, which is active with multiple discussions on latest updates, best practices, and feasible solutions, etc. The next in line is Learning Weekend series, which is our webinar series, the one that you're attending right now. And herein we collaborate with the thought leaders to create a medium to enable learning from their rich experience. Our own very own version of our HR Conclave is our Chai Buddy series, which is a great opportunity for all to connect and build their professional network. We've also come up with Shining HR Award, which was basically formed to create an opportunity for young HR achievers and enable them to showcase their contribution and achievement amongst the HR fraternity. The next in line, which you'll see on the next slide, is the Core Connect initiative, wherein we invite views on trending topics and the best insights are shared and published in the groups. We've also tied up with HRCI, and HRCI Scholarship Test was our latest initiative to make it most affordable for the most deserving HR professionals. Also in line is our Career Center, which is an AI-enabled application tracking system which connects recruiters and candidates designed to automatically match resumes to JDs. We also have launched our Core HRIR research initiative, which focuses on the future of work, its impact on HR, and developing future competencies for HRBP, for human resource business professionals, etc. Our final initiative is the Candid Conversation series, which is basically a series of webinars with business owners or CEOs to help HR professionals evolve to a better business perspective. The next slide would show you some brief information about HRCI. So for anyone aspiring to be an HRCI certified HR professional, HRCI has removed the global experience requirement to allow HR practitioners to experience and learn while engaging in cross-border HR practices. Additionally, the GPHR exam content outline has been updated to reflect a streamlined format and content. For more information on any of these certifications, please do visit hrci.org. Coming on to our topic for today, on to the next slide, our leader for today is Ms. Christina Herman, who's with us today, and she is currently serving as Chief Talent Officer for Shipman Goodwin, an American law firm. Please join me in welcoming Christina onto this platform. Hi, Christina, welcome on board, and we're so thankful and delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation and opportunity.
And what I would also like to share with our viewers right now is that she's been really kind to spare some of her valuable time for us today. Despite an urgent business commitment which requires her to fly immediately after the session, she chose to honor this appointment with us when this session was yet to be announced. So thanks once more, Christina. And the next slide, sorry. Yeah, so the next slide would talk a bit about her experience and expertise. So Christina essentially expertises in leading transformational change from incremental improvements to complete turnarounds. She has helped organizations achieve better versions of themselves. Though Christina's commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity in workplace, she has contributed to Shipman Goodwin being named a top firm for female partners by Law 360 and a best place to work for women by Working Mothers magazine. Christina is passionate about bringing out the best and highest use of each contributor's talents in the furtherance of organizational goals. She's also launched SNG University to provide increased professional development opportunities for attorneys and staff. She's built infrastructures that identify and optimize talent while maximizing efficiency. Prior to Shipman Goodwin, Christina has held senior executive positions at top AM Law 100 law firms in New York, San Francisco, Palo Alto, Richmond, Philadelphia, and DC, with responsibility for operations in London, Brussels, Frankfurt, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Singapore. Christina is dual certified as a senior and global professional in human resources from HRCI. She's earned a BA in psychology from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and she's also an MBA from European School of Management and Technology, Berlin, Germany. Just two-liners about myself. I'm an HR professional with over 14 years of experience in startups as well as well-established organizations. Through the entire gamut of HR sub-functions is what I have been responsible for. I've primarily worked in IT and ITES and professional services organizations. So without taking much of time, Christina, I would like to hand over the session to you to help us enlighten on your vision and expertise and knowledge on integrating diversity and inclusion into business. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having me. Are you able to see my screen? I'm moving it now, but are you able to see my slides?
Yes,
okay.
Everything is going pretty smooth.
Okay, great. So let me talk a little bit about how I want to move through this conversation. And I will tell you, this is something I really do have a strong passion for because I believe diversity and inclusion should not be something that's a carve out. And I'll talk about that further in the slides, but it really should be integrated into the business. So first I'll talk about kind of the origins of diversity, inclusion, and efforts in the U.S. because I think it's important to understand where we came from in order to appreciate where we are. Talk a little bit about the impetus for D&I efforts in India. I will tell you, I did a little bit of research before doing this presentation, just to get a sense of how D&I efforts have been in India. Then go on to my overarching approach and philosophy to addressing diversity and inclusion in the business, and then share with you some best practices that I have been a part of in these efforts of addressing D&I in the business. So for starters, in the US, we had a bit of a crisis, and that really is what prompted and how our D&I efforts were born. There were a number of very high profile and high cost lawsuits that happened. So the first one up there, Solomon Brothers, it was amazing that this was a case famously known as the Boom Boom Room case. And the reason it had that title is because there were a practice in the organization where there was a room in the lower level of the building, And when women were called into a meeting in that room in the building, they were routinely intimidated, routinely harassed. And it's just amazing that that would happen. What ended up happening is there were 23 women who came forward and just said, you know, we can't take this anymore. And they were joined by the National Organization of Women, the NOW organization, and they sued Solomon Brothers for harassment, intimidation, and discrimination. They won a suit of $3.2 million as a result of that case. Not only did they win that large amount of money, but the Solomon Brothers, as part of the settlement, were compelled to set aside $15 million for D&I efforts throughout the organization. The next case I'll talk about in the lower right corner there is Merrill Lynch. And there were fewer women involved in that case. There were only 8. But this was an interesting case too, and it's really amazing. They had experienced a lot of harassment, truly hostile work environment. Men were being promoted over women. Women were not really treated very well at the organization. And at one point, some women stood up and said, you know, I'm just as qualified as the man who received that promotion. And the next day, one of the managers copied an article that was called, the title of it was Stop Whining, and distributed the article to all of the women in the company and essentially said, stop whining, just, you know, sit back and take it. That case resulted in a $2.2 million settlement. The next one, larger, much larger in scale in terms of the settlement, but also in the number of women. This was, again, a situation where women were routinely not being treated well in the workforce and within this company. And this case involved 340 women who came forward to wage the claim of sexual harassment. And as you can see there, that was a huge award as well, $54 million in that case. The next one, huge award as well. This one was a wage discrimination case. And in this case, there were African-American employees who claimed that, or were able, I mean, they made the claim that they were able to substantiate that equally situated, non-diverse employees, same job, same experience, same education and everything, were paid 26,000 US dollars more than they were. Mm-hmm. And so they won that case and were awarded $156 billion. So all of these cases were coming in the late 90s, and it really was something pretty much akin to what we are experiencing now or experienced recently with the Me Too movement, where people were just standing up and saying, this is wrong, we're not going to take this anymore, companies need to do something about it. And they went to the resource that they had available to them was the court system. Similarly, kind of running parallel within the legal industry, what was happening was the organizations that were engaging attorneys for their services started to demand diversity. They asked for more diverse pitch teams. They wanted diverse attorneys staffing their matters. They wanted to have the legal team that represented the company be a reflection of the workforce that they had, within their organization. And so law firms were starting to have these demands. So the combination of the multiple lawsuits that were being waged and won and the demands of the clients resulted in the formation of diversity and inclusion committees. This really was kind of the birth of bringing forward diversity and inclusion committees. And even as I mentioned before, in the one case, part of the settlement was that they had to allocate a significant amount of money towards diversity and inclusion initiatives. So the D&I committees were formed out of this whole movement, if you will. Lots of upsides that came out of the D&I committees. For one, it started to illuminate the issues. It got to the point where people were starting to talk about things in the workplace that they hadn't talked about before, and really recognizing that things that were happening were not okay. Particularly, I still am just amazed by the Boom Boom Room case, that they would think it was okay to have a designated place where female employees were harassed. It's like that's where you would go. And it's amazing in this day and age to think about that happening. Obviously, nothing like that would happen now, but it was happening at that time. And so what happened with the D&I committees is people started talking about it and started recognizing, okay, these practices really are not okay. It opened up discussions, encouraged discussions amongst not only between management and employees, but cross-functional employees themselves. And I would say, this sprung out of what was happening in the workplace, and kind of similar, as I said before, to the Me Too movement. I would say right now in the U.S. again, we're at another crossroads. Sure, everyone is aware of the movements and protests that happened over the past few weeks with the Black Lives Matter movement. So I'd say we're at another crossroads, and it will be interesting to see what springs up as a result of that. Another thing that happened, kind of an upside of the D&I committees is, and this is, I think, more U.S. specific. I don't think that this necessarily happens in India, but the D&I committees started to promote Heritage Month celebrations. So routinely now we have Asian American Pride Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, Black History Month. Each of these months within organizations, they celebrate the culture, they celebrate the food, they celebrate the traditions, and it really has helped to educate the broader population within a workforce in terms of the diversity that exists there and the things that they bring as a result of their diversity. I'm going to stop for just a minute and say, if there are questions that people have as I'm going along, please feel free to interject if there's anything that you want me to slow down on, or if that's
Sure.
okay.
Christina, I would keep an eye out for the questions that come along, and I'll of course put those questions across to you. So
Okay.
yeah.
So I just keep on going. Okay.
Sure. And just one point, which is very similar to the current point that you just mentioned, that in America they have Black History Month, or something that's dedicated to Hispanic Heritage Month, and the cross-cultural celebrations. I think I'm not so much aware about American corporate or America as a country, but in Canada, I think there has been a lot of inclusion and cultural promotions for the Indian population that's there. So of course, the Indian population will also be able to correlate to this.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks for that insight. I wasn't aware. So I'll keep moving right along. It's a little strange because all I see is my screen, and I don't have a sense of interaction, but I will keep moving unless you tell me otherwise.
Absolutely.
The other upside that came as a result of the D&I committees was that it provided leadership opportunities. What happened was organizations were starting to form these committees, and frankly, they just didn't know what to do to enhance diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And so they went to diverse individuals and said, we need your leadership, we need your help. Can you tell us what to do? And I will tell you, I do not ascribe to the philosophy that you have to have a diverse person leading D&I initiatives, but be that as it may, that is what happened, what transpired. And so lots of leadership opportunities were formed as a result of these committees. There was a downside, though, and right now we are frankly living that downside. So one of the major downsides was what happened with these committees is that it relegated the responsibility to a small group of people within an organization. All obviously well-meaning people, well-intentioned, but it was very insular. It was just this group of people, the D&I committee over here, who's working on these initiatives, and not bringing other people into the initiatives, other than having them to join them in the celebration. And so that really kind of started setting things apart. The other thing is, because you had just such a small group of people who were charged with D&I efforts, and what people saw publicly mostly was, or to a large extent, was these the celebrations. It gave people pause, and people were kind of, it almost trivialized or minimized the key issues, which were gaining access to promotion opportunities, or gaining access to jobs. So it resulted in a bit of confusion. The other thing that became something of a setback is it began to put people on the defensive. You had well-meaning people within the organization who were champions of diversity and inclusion, frankly, and who were allies, if you will, for the effort, but they felt that they were being put on the defensive for things that they hadn't contributed to. I mean, maybe they were beneficiaries of and were a part of the organization, but they hadn't contributed to. And so then you put people on the defensive, they're going to take a step back, and you're losing them as someone who could contribute to the efforts. And then finally, on the downside, there really became quite a bit of diversity fatigue, because people were seeing these celebrations happening, lots of talk about diversity inclusion, but no real movement in terms of any advancements, or I wouldn't say not any advancements, not significant advancements. And so there really became quite a bit of fatigue as a result. There's a couple of articles here that I've put on the slides if anyone is interested in reading. These are both great articles. The one in the upper left was a study at Atlassian, who is a software company actually headquartered or originated in either Australia or New Zealand. I think Australia, but international company. And they started a movement where they would stop focusing specifically on diversity and inclusion, and instead focusing on talent, and focusing on promotion, focusing on training for everyone. And it really made a difference in sort of how they framed the view of D&I, and how it was promoted in the organization. The other article there at the bottom right, the year in diversity fatigue, came from someone who himself was a champion of diversity and inclusion, and who worked hard in the efforts, but was feeling the fatigue of being part of just a D&I committee that was charged with these efforts, and no one else in the organization was a part of it. And also a bit experiencing a bit of the trivialization or minimization of what these key and very important issues were. So if anyone's interested, those are a couple of good articles that you can reference. So in the US, again, because of where we came from, it really was organizations that were reacting. You may be aware that in the US, we're a very litigious society. And so what companies were doing, frankly, was trying not to be sued. Their response to D&I was, okay, let's do a committee, let's do these celebrations, let's do all of these things so that we don't get sued. And so they were really reacting as opposed to being proactive about their efforts. In India, as I've come to learn, and someone please correct me if my learning is wrong, but my understanding is that D&I efforts in India are fairly new. It's been over the past 3 to 6 years or so that there has been a focus on D&I. And it has not come as a result of lawsuits. It's not reactive. And in fact, it's very proactive. And I will tell you, frankly, I think you sit in a better place coming from the proactive angle as opposed to coming from a reactive angle. Because when you are being reactive, and I've experienced this myself in some of my organizations, you will have people who are simply, have people in the organization, they're simply checking the box. Okay, we did this, we did this, now we're set, without fully internalizing the importance of D&I within their organizations and not really making true efforts. So I applaud you for being in the proactive mode and really doing things that are much more progressive. I did speak in my research to someone who is in the talent acquisition space at JP Morgan Chase, based in New Delhi, and she told me about an initiative at JP Morgan to achieve 50% gender diversity by the year 2020. And I think that's amazing. I am not aware of any such aggressive and lofty initiatives that are happening in the US. So I think it's wonderful to take it from a proactive stance and be more progressive than opposed to a reactive stance.
Thanks, Christina. I would just like to add one point, and I think most of the Indian viewers watching this webinar would be aware that there are a lot of organizations and there are a lot of, I would say, entrepreneurs who are focusing on hiring women after, they have been into a sabbatical, or, women who have quit jobs to take care of their kids. So there is indeed a lot of focus, and there's a lot of entrepreneurial effort going into that direction. So yeah, your observation is so apt there, so that we are into a proactive mode rather than reactive. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for confirming that. I just think it's a wonderful position to be in and much more proactive. So just kind of continuing that thread, the initial focus in India has been on gender diversity. There has been increased female representation at all levels, and that's been a wonderful thing. I think that because it's new, there's still some lingering constraints or sort of traditional role characteristic views that are a hindrance. One of the examples, again, that someone that I spoke to told me that it would not be uncommon for a woman who is at a top position at a firm, CEO at the firm, spends all day working hard, and then still has the expectation that they have to go home and cook dinner after like a full day of work. So,
that's right.
So I'm on point again, but that's something that's like quite a challenge. I would say.
That is, yeah.
The expanded focus in India then has started to bring others into the fold, considering veterans. I had the conversation with someone who said there's this recognition that some people in the military end up retiring from military service at an early age and still have a lot of work life ahead of them, and so they are wonderful candidates for bringing into the corporate world. The other, which is so pleased to hear, disabled are viewed as especially able, and that's putting a positive twist on it, which I'm going to adopt that term. It really is, as opposed to focusing on the disability, you say that they are especially able, and making accommodations for them. LGBTQ, also bringing them into the fold. That's, as I understand it, just a harder or more challenging group to bring in, because it's not like you can easily identify someone who's LGBTQ, and sometimes there's sensitivities around the conversations, but even still, there has been this expansion of bringing in other groups. One challenging construct that I've learned of is the caste system, which essentially gives some people educational and economic advantages by virtue of their birthright. And so as that filters into organizations, that can result in some preferential treatment. It can also result in kind of on the other side, a feeling of people should be in a certain position or not as a basis of the caste. But one thing that I learned too, really haunting, was in terms of religions and the various religions and languages that are spoken in India, there's such an openness to that variety and appreciation for differences and acceptances. I learned of a company that in a more urban area where they would have like a celebration similar to the Heritage Month celebrations, although not exactly the same, but where people would share dishes associated with their religion and just kind of do a celebration of the various religions. So this is kind of where I gathered things are in India, but again, just a very positive position to be in. So moving forward, what is the case for diversity, equity, and inclusion? This McKinsey and Company does a study every 2 years. They do it, so they have another one that's coming out, or probably is out now. Although my data is from their 2018 report, but it really is the case that diverse teams perform more strongly than non-diverse teams. And so you can see the statistics there. 21% more likely to outperform the company is if they have gender diversity, and 27% more likely to have superior value creation. It is the case that the more perspectives that you have on a team, the greater value you have. I mean, the more opportunity you have to come up with innovative responses and proactive and progressive responses. Profitability much higher with diversity on your team. And just conversely, kind of looking at that bottom tile there, companies lacking in diversity are 29% less likely to achieve at the above average level. So you can just see it in reverse. If you don't have the diversity there, then your company is not going to do as well. And again, just in terms of attracting top talent, if you have the diversity there, then you're going to attract top talent. If you don't, then you're just not likely to get so to speak, in winning the talent wars. So clearly, there is such a strong business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And not only is it the right thing to do, but also the numbers bear out that it does result in success in an organization. So as you move forward and start thinking about, okay, so what do we know that it's the right thing to do? We know that it makes your company stronger. What are the steps to take in order to start incorporating it? One of the things that's important to avoid is the special needs, special treatment trap. And I will tell you, this has been a hurdle to overcome in the US, where there is this feeling and philosophy and thinking that the reason women are not in top positions, for example, or the reason that veterans are not being hired is because they don't quite have everything that it takes to succeed, and so they need remediation, if you will, and so they need some special treatment. They have special needs that need to be treated differently, and that is quite the contrary, really, of what the thinking should be. It really is the case that all they really need is to have the opportunity, to have the equal opportunity, the equal level of educational opportunities and business opportunities to succeed. So the answer really is to start engaging in workplace engineering. And by that, I mean, you really have to look at your organization, and sometimes you have to force the issue of diversity inclusion as opposed to thinking that it's going to happen organically. And when you do that, after time, over time, it becomes a part of your regular operation. But you have to have a starting point. And that starting point really is to engage in workplace engineering. So the thing about workplace engineering is you have to allow for the fact that not everyone is going to participate in these efforts in the same way. Because frankly, everyone doesn't have the same comfort as in the same way. So it has to be okay that some people will have minor roles. It has to be okay that some people will be auxiliary players, and it has to be okay that you have passive participation and supporting roles, because you will also have people who are in the on the other side, the major roles, champion starring roles. You need all of those players within your organization to make it work. And it's really, really important. And I will tell you, this is again a path that has occasionally plagued U.S. organizations, is people are somehow chastised or made to feel bad if they aren't playing a major role, or they're somehow made to feel like they don't um, agree, or they're not engaged in the D&I efforts if they want to be an auxiliary player or supporting role. So it really is important that in kind of furtherance of the whole notion of diversity and inclusion, that you are okay with different people playing different roles, and you don't make people feel somehow lesser involved because they have a different. So how do you do that? You formulate fully integrated solutions. It is so important to recognize that D&I should not just be the purview of a few. Like previously with D&I committees, you've got like this group of people who are working on it, no one else. It really needs to be understood that it's the responsibility of everyone in the organization. It's not a carve out. It's not something that's set aside. It's something that is completely woven into the fabric of how you do your business. So what you have to do is think about process, platform, and people. Really being thoughtful about how you are structuring your processes and procedures, and really being purposeful. You have to start, the starting point really is to think the whole thing through, understand what your goals are, and establish the processes that are going to get you there. So define where you are as an organization. That's the starting point. You define, okay, we do not have very many, veterans in our organizations. We don't have very many especially able individuals in our organization. So we want to make sure that we set up a system that allows us to attract those people. So you take stock of where you are. And what I always say too is there is absolutely no shame in stating where you are. Maybe you can say, it's not that we don't have many, we don't have any. And that's your starting point. I mean, your starting point, frankly, is just where you are. And you set your goals according to that starting point. Like JP Morgan the goal of the 50%. I mean, for an organization that is lacking in diversity, 50% is going to be high as a starting point. But you set your goals based on where you are, and absolutely there's no shame in where you are standing today, because where you're standing today is not where you're going to be standing tomorrow. So best practices, delegating responsibilities, as I've said before, it really does not have to be the case that your D&I people have all the responsibility for everything D&I. It's important that other people who are willing to step up and be in a major role. And again, it has to be someone who has that willingness and aptitude. You can't give the assignment to someone who really wants to be, a passive supporter. You have to have someone who has that willingness and have them take over some of the activities. So, in the case of the U.S. Heritage Month celebrations, it doesn't have to be D&I personnel who do that. I mean, essentially, we're talking about putting together social events. So there is no special talent necessarily inherent in someone who is a D&I practitioner who can put on a Hispanic heritage celebration. It really is just a matter of having those sorts of organizational abilities. So first best practice is really start delegating the responsibility, making sure other people in the organization are taking some of these assignments. The other is really the starting point of bringing people into your organization. You have to have consistency in the interview process. And with that consistency, what you want to do is develop a set of questions that everyone answers. Because what happens is if you don't have that level of consistency, then you run into the problem, or the potential problem of having interviewer bias. And that is just something that we all have naturally. We all have our particular affinities, and those can come through in the interview process if you're not structuring your questions appropriately. So you want to make sure that all of the candidates that you are considering are answering the same questions, and you're considering responses to all of those questions, as opposed to having people have free rein to ask questions that may veer off into other directions that frankly have nothing to do with the job. So the best practice, again, as a continuation of interviewing, is having the training. Everyone in your organization who's involved in interviewing should go through this form of training, because as you know, some of the biases that exist in interviews, you can have the halo effect, horn effect, some anchoring, contrast, similar biases. I mean, these are just a few of them that I'm naming. But again, I'm sure as HR professionals, you're familiar of these traps that you fall into when they see a candidate, for example, who, like them, loves golf. They find out that they love golf. And then they start going down this path talking about golf. And then because they have this perception, they completely forget to talk about all of the person's qualifications. And they'll recommend this person for hire just because they have this similarity. What I always like to tell people is you're not hiring a friend, you're hiring someone to do a job. So it's wonderful if you have things in common, but that's not a reason for pushing someone over to make them,
Yeah.
the higher candidate.
Sure. Christina, there is a question related to hiring, and the question is from there is a question that has come up related to hiring, and the question is from Ashish Mandiratta, who asks, "How can technology help in eliminating bias from the hiring process, and how can technology help in improving diversity in an organization?"
That's wonderful. So I think you can start using AI is just is a technology that artificial intelligence is a technology that is burgeoning, and really there are a number of talent acquisition platforms that allow you to do just this, is you program in certain questions that you are asking all of the individuals. And so it's purely agnostic in terms of your interaction with the individual. What you're doing is you have the set of questions. It's it's stripped of any identity, so you don't have initially when you receive the data, you don't have a name associated with it. So you don't can't make an identity that way. You can't. It won't be. It's gender neutral. It is neutral in terms of religion. So what you would do is utilize the talent acquisition software to do your initial screening, and that way you can have completely agnostic initial selection process. You can absolutely eliminate bias that way. And one caution that I have about this, and I think this is a wonderful, wonderful way to have your initial screening. There's software out there that will allow you to do that. The one caution I have is it will also screen out then sort of your alternative candidates who don't necessarily fit into those buckets that you have identified, but who may be really strong individuals that you want to speak to. So I'd say absolutely you can use that technology and do like your initial screening, but I would go back after using that technology if you're not satisfied with the applicant pool that you're seeing, and then take a look at some of those alternative candidates who were kicked out, so to speak, of the process because of their responses to those questions. Good question.
Thank you.
Sure. So go on then. Work assignments, agnostic work assignments. So I have worked primarily in the legal industry, although I have also worked in the consulting world as well, which is also professional services. But within these industries, people advance within the organization on the basis of the cases that they get to work on the basis of the clients that they work with, and kind of on the basis of the exposure that they get. And what can happen in organizations is it's not, I don't think, purposeful or intentional, but when a partner is giving out an assignment, they will naturally go to the person who is like in the office next door to them, or someone who they have familiarity with, someone who has commonalities.
Christina, your voice is fading. Your voice is fading. Yeah.
Sorry, is this better?
Yeah, this is certainly much better. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I have to stop moving. So, what can happen is diverse individuals in an organization will not get those choice assignments just because they're not within view or sight of the partners who are giving out assignments. So there's a software that we use in the legal industry, and I'm not sure of the equivalent of it outside of the legal industry, but I'll explain it to you. It's called BI, B is in Victor, I is in India, eval. And what individuals can do is they input their profiles within this system. And in their profile, they will say, I have experience working on X, but I would like to get experience working on Y. And I am especially good at A, and I would like to continue to develop in that area. So when a partner then goes to give an assignment, rather than doing it by sight, by just looking at the person in the office next to them, they'll go into the software and say, okay, I need someone who has this particular experience. I need someone who has this particular interest. And then they will pick up people for assignments that way. So it's completely agnostic in terms of not identifying the individual, specifically in terms of their demographics, perhaps, but it's strictly looking at the skills that they have and the contributions that they are interested in making. And this way, you don't have the bias of one person always getting the great work and someone else who's always getting kind of the grunt work. And and by consequence, not getting the same level of opportunities. The other kind of best practice is the performance review process. And for a bit of levity, I have a cartoon there, just to add a little bit of levity. But
I guess that's the best
so the
preference ever. So
yes. The first point, again, as HR professionals, you all know the performance review process should involve goal setting, measurement, input, both ratings and narrative. The piece that I've highlighted there or put in bold is implementing a human resources quality check. And what that is after an evaluation has been completed, you actually ask people in HR to review the evaluation to make sure there are no biases associated with how someone is being rated. You don't want someone to be rated poorly, for example, for having had to take medical leave. You don't want someone to be rated poorly, perhaps for having had to attend to family matters. So it's important to have that step in there. It's like a leveler. It's not that the HR personnel is going to know about the specifics of the job performance, but they can make sure that there are not things embedded in the evaluation that are unfairly rating someone lower than what they should be. So I think that's just a very important point to have as a part of your evaluation system. Continuing with evaluation and best practices is really holding people accountable. And this goes again to having the D&I efforts fully embedded and integrated into the business. So if there are goals, for example, the hiring goal of 50% gender diversity at JP Morgan Chase, that's what upper management has sort of agreed as their goal. It's important then to hold the business units accountable for achieving those goals, and not just the business units. I think it's important then to tie bonuses and compensation to achieving those goals. If it's something that you're measuring, people will value it, and if it's something that is, rewarded, people will much more value. The other piece of the accountability is not just holding it to the business units, but also on an individual basis. That you hold managers and supervisors to having certain D&I goals that they set for themselves, and that you evaluate on an annual basis. So having that accountability be at high levels as well as at individual levels. Finally, best practice is promotion consideration. And I'm not sure how this works in all organizations, but in law firms, what we've started doing is we actually have a committee that considers candidates who are being put up for promotion. And it's from a broad section of different practices, from HR, that can take a look at the candidates who are being put up for promotion and then kind of interrupt them. The committee member, the person who's putting someone up for promotion. So I throw out an example. Suppose you have someone who's being put up for promotion for a management position in marketing, and they obviously are qualified for that because they've been put up for promotion. But someone on the committee can challenge it and say, hey, what about John? John has run these wonderful, incredible marketing campaigns for me, and I found him to be very responsive. The promoter can say, well, John doesn't attend all of these marketing events. And you maybe it is the case that John is especially able and has mobility limitations and is not able to go out to all of these events, and promotional. But is that really necessary for them to succeed at a job? So you really do have the opportunity to challenge promotions and make sure that everybody is being considered equally for promotions, and that the defense of the promotion really is a strong one and a credible one. So kind of going on to my conclusion here. Clearly, it is the case that D&I and equity and underrepresentation of diverse individuals is a concern. But the good news is it's something that can be overcome. It's not just that it's the right thing, and sometimes that's all that people need to know is that it's the right thing. Sometimes people need to know more than that. And so it is also really good business sense because it increases profitability, and businesses are more successful if they are more diverse. So it's important to just throw away the idea that you need specialists to do diversity initiatives and that diverse individuals need special treatment. That's not the case. What you need to have embedded in your organization is systems that extend the responsibility for D&I to everyone within the organization, and thereby opens up the opportunities of everyone in the organization. With that, I will ask if there are questions. I'm right on time, it looks like.
Thanks, Christina. We do have quite some questions, some of them which came in during the registrations.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So do I have
the first question? Sorry, you were saying something. Yeah. So.
Oh no, I was saying. Okay. Sorry.
So I can just remove this. I think this is better. So some of the questions that have come in. One of the question is from an Indian bank. There's a senior manager of an Indian bank called Ramya. So the question is from Ramya, and she is asking how to showcase that diversity is important to top management. So perhaps the company that she is with is not too much into diversity. So that's what she wants to understand, how to showcase that diversity is important to top management.
That's a great question. And what I found is the best way to make the case is with data. And McKinsey is a great source for that. Bain & Company, other professional services firms that do these diversity studies. I think it's important. The slide that I had, the McKinsey 2018 report, the annual report, I think you just need to show the data that teams that are more diverse succeed in ways that non-diverse teams do not succeed. As just presenting the data, and that is like, how can you say as an organization, well, I don't want to be more successful? How can you say no to those things? I think really just presenting the data is what tends to make the case.
Thank you. So the next question is a little elaborate one. Comes from Kalai. That's the name of the HR professional. She is asking, he or she, I'm not able to understand from the name, but they're asking two questions. One is, what are the sources you leverage for diversity hiring? Second is, research says women who are in career break for various reasons are the biggest workforce that has not been utilized properly by the organization. Do you hire such non-tech women in finance, HR, etc.? If you do you run any special program to hire such workforce? So let me just split it up into two parts. Let me not just push on the second one. The first one is, what are the sources you leverage for diversity hiring? I'm sure that would be different in US, but still, if you could enlighten her.
Yeah. No, that's a very good question. And that has been something that we've had to push in law firms, because law firms tend to only want to go for their lawyer population to certain law schools, and they only want to recruit from like Harvard, like the top law schools, and thereby sort of eliminating the opportunity to go to other schools where they can get a more diverse pool. So one of the things that we do is we push basically expand the pool of schools that we look at. So you expand the schools to go to some, it doesn't have to be a top school. You can get really strong candidates from a second tier school who have been successful in their education and will be successful at your firm. So that's number one. Number two is, I don't know if you would have this equally in India, but in the US, there are various ethnic organizations. Like there is a Hispanic bar, which is, it's populated with people from Hispanic heritage, and so we actually target those special organizations that are specific to various ethnic groups and do our recruiting pool there. So essentially what we do is expand the pool beyond kind of the standard pool that we have used in the past.
Thank you. So the second part is research says women who are on career break for various reasons are the biggest workforce that has not been utilized properly by the organization. Do you hire
sorry,
such?
1 second.
So I'll repeat
women
it.
Who are
Yes, research says women who are in career break for various reasons are the biggest workforce that has not been utilized properly by the organization. Do you
Yes.
hire non-tech women in areas like finance, HR, etc.? If you do you run any special program to hire such workforce?
So unfortunately, we do not. The roles that we have in the legal industry are fairly specific, and the skill set needed is, and the education requirements is fairly specific. And so we do not veer, unfortunately, it's just a matter of the industry. We don't veer outside of that because special training is needed and special education is needed. And we, as an organization and law firm, are not really equipped to deliver that training. And so we don't, unfortunately, we don't.
Okay. Now, I would combine two questions into one because essentially they mean the same thing.
Okay.
The question is how diversity and inclusion has become important, immersive, and integrated in business, especially during and beyond COVID-19 times.
Yeah. So it really had, it's become more of a challenge, frankly, in COVID-19 times, because we can't do the same degree of outreach that we've been able to do before because everything is done remotely. And so we don't have the opportunity to go to these organizations. I think what we will see as a result, unfortunately, is likely to be sort of a diminution of our recruiting efforts because of that. And what I look forward to is getting beyond where we are now and able to kind of resume that level of recruiting. But it has had an impact. It like absolutely has had an impact because we have had to sort of retract from some of the recruiting efforts that we've had in the past.
Thank you. The next question is, I think that's a fairly repeated one. And we've already covered the best practices, but this person, Surabhi Gupta, she wants to know what are the industry's best practices to effectively manage the diverse workforce. So the focus is on managing the diverse workforce.
So here's the thing is like, I don't think, my philosophy is that I don't think the diverse workforce needs special management. I don't believe that what it takes for a diverse person to succeed in an organization is any different than what it takes a non-diverse person to succeed. So I would say the best practice, frankly, is to have strong management throughout your organization and make sure that sort of your overarching philosophies are including everyone and making sure they all have the opportunities. I really, and sorry if this is not going to end up being the answer that you're looking for, but I don't believe that there should be a separate management system for diverse individuals versus non-diverse individuals, because I just think that runs so contrary to what you're trying to achieve when you're talking about integration and having everyone be a part of the organization. If you're having a separate way or a different way that you manage one group versus another group, then what you're saying is these people can't make it without these additional support mechanisms and systems. And I don't believe that's the case. I think it is actually contrary to what you want to achieve, is that everyone, given the same equal opportunities, can be successful.
Sure, thank you. There is the next question is basically, what are the metrics to monitor diversity initiatives? So a lot of HR people take initiatives related to diversity, maybe, but then probably they're not able to monitor how effective those initiatives are. So this question is in that direction, and the question is, what are the metrics to monitor diversity initiatives to ensure that it is imbibed in the culture?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think that the metrics are truly looking at your population. And as I said, you have a starting point of, we have this many women in leadership positions. We have this many specially abled individuals in our various workforce. We have this many veterans. I think the best measurements to say is 1 year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, we started with 2 people in these roles, and now we have 10. You really do have to make sure that those numbers are increasing, and that is how you see that your D&I efforts are successful. If you've done all of these things and your numbers remain the same, then you're not doing the right things. You're not doing them well. The measurement truly is looking at the landscape that exists 3, 4, 5 years out, and it has to be a different landscape. If it isn't, then you haven't done your job and you haven't been successful in how you've managed your efforts.
Thank you. So the next person is Dipanshi, and she wants to thank you for taking up this webinar with us. And she wants to ask, what program can be run at local country levels to inculcate the D&I best practices among hiring managers? So basically, she wants to understand what initiatives can be taken, effective initiatives can be taken, since you have that kind of an experience.
Sure. I would say a few things. The first is to expand your outreach in your recruiting pool, making sure that you're not going to the same sources. One of the things actually that I learned in a little bit of my research is that there's a tendency to source your talent only from the urban areas, expanding that reach to some of the rural areas where there may be an issue with travel getting into the cities, but that doesn't mean that talent doesn't exist there. So expanding where your resources in terms of where you're sourcing talent. The other is really, when you're evaluating candidates, go to the structured interview model where you are making sure you don't have biases in the way that you are selecting candidates. It is absolutely the case that a qualified candidate could come forward, and because they have diverse characteristics that are not similar to the person who's interviewing, they will not feel that that's a strong candidate. And so if you eliminate that bias by having these set questions that everyone's asking, then you can make sure that person is part of the consideration. The other thing, like there was one question who asked about technology. Start using AI. I mean, there are talent acquisition software platforms that will allow you to have an agnostic view of your candidates, because the software itself is asking the questions. It's not a person that's asking them. And so when you're evaluating the responses to the questions, you don't see a person in front of you that you're evaluating. You're starting out with just what the responses are. And you're taking the strongest responses, as opposed to looking at someone's surname or looking at someone's gender and making a decision on the basis of that.
Thank you. The next question is from Amit, whose company also has operations in China. So just to give you a background, I think you must be aware, apart from COVID-19, which is generally thought to have kind of originated from China, India is currently having some political tension with China. So Amit asks, how do you address the challenge of xenophobia during this challenging phase? We have a significant set of operations based out of China. So,
yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. So he wants to know.
Yeah. I think what you have to do, and this is actually something that we have done in the US, is introduce sensitivity training, where you are essentially introducing people in your organization to different cultures. And this is as a bit of an offshoot from the Heritage Month celebrations. But when people begin to appreciate different cultures and understand them better, then that chips away at the biases that they have towards those individuals in those cultures. It actually reverses it, where they have more appreciation for it, as opposed to feeling that that difference is somehow bad and somehow it is not. It's unfortunate, but differences are often viewed as negative as opposed to positive. When you start having the sensitivity training and educate people around those differences, then the tension of surrounding them falls away, and you have to have a gained appreciation for it.
Thank you. The next question is from Pritesh, who is working in Mumbai, and he wants to understand what is the business impact of diversity on a company. I think by business impact, he means overall, not just the revenue, but the popularity of the company as well.
Mm-hmm. I say, frankly, sorry?
I said, as per your experience, if you could answer that. I know it's a slightly different question, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. I would say really what has happened, and I've seen this within different business units and teams, is that people start to work together in a better way, because they gain this appreciation of the differences, and they can actually see that within a team, people can bring in ideas that someone wouldn't have thought of, just because of they don't have a perspective of coming from a different place. And when you bring in that different perspective, you really do truly have stronger teams, because you have better ideas, you have greater innovation. And I literally have seen that happening when I delivered a training once that was called Cross Teams, and we brought together the different functional units and had brainstorming sessions with them. And it was amazing how people in marketing who felt like they would not take suggestions from someone in finance came to see that actually someone in finance was able to give, because they came from a different perspective and had a different idea. They were actually able to help them to improve what they were doing in marketing. So it really is the case. You do see people coming together and starting to appreciate that you can get the idea generation piece of it is really very powerful.
Mhm. Thank you. The last question, perhaps, that I would like to take up for you is, I would like to pose to you is, so there are various diversities, like gender, geographical, LGBTQ community, multi-generational diversity. How do we assess the challenges in each of these? If somebody has to start as new, then how do you go about understanding the challenges that will come across?
I think it starts with actually being open to having a dialogue about it. There was something that I did at a previous firm where I did it was called reverse mentoring, where I had a diverse individual paired with a non-diverse individual and had that person explain their experience to them, sometimes in totally a non-threatening way. It's experiential, and so I think once you start to appreciate different experiences and how people have come, what their experiences have led them to the point that they are, then you really do start to have things, kind of barriers falling away. So just in terms of all the different kinds of diversity that you have generational diversity, as you said, ethnic, gender diversity. Generational diversity, especially right now, is increasingly something that we need to be aware of, and as a younger generation comes into the workforce. So I'd say have an open forum where people have the comfort level to just express what their experiences are, so that you have, again, an appreciation of that. Not sure if I fully answered your question, but
Yeah,
that's kind of been my approach.
it does give a lot of insight into how it can be handled. So thank you for answering all these questions, Christina. And
Sure.
with this, yeah. So with this, I would like to just quickly say in a few word of thanks. So thank you all of you who have especially taken up time on a weekday, like a Friday weekend, to attend this webinar
Sure.
and contributed to the spirit of and vision of learning. So this is really very motivating for us and helps us keep going ahead. I would also like to
Great.
thank the core HRIR core team and above all our thought leader for today, Ms. Christina Herman. Also, a word of thanks to our mentors and many more people who are behind the scenes, without whom we wouldn't have really been able to come this far. So thank you so much, Christina, once again, and hope you
Thank you so
have a
much for
nice
having me.
journey.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you,
hope
Christina.
this has been beneficial, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
No, it is. It is. In fact, you covered the topic so very well, and you took in all the points, all the important aspects that were very, very vital to the topic. So thank you so much once again, and
Thank
have a
you.
nice weekend. Have a nice
Thanks.
weekend,
You
all of
too.
you. Take
All right.
care. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.